in the academic and development sectors. He is on the board of several organizations and is passionate about sustainable development. It is my pleasure to welcome to today's webinar, Professor Obafemi Ajibola. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bumi. And good morning, everybody. You're welcome to this webinar. Bumi has given us some good introduction to the webinar. Let me just start off by saying I'm hoping that we will all contribute and be part of this webinar. We want to make it as participatory as possible. Panel discussion. And I've been asked to talk on participatory stakeholder evaluation. Please, can you make sure that we share the screen so that we can follow as I talk. Participatory stakeholder evaluation. The reason we have picked this topic is because we think it's a very useful approach to evaluation, but it's not so commonly used. And we just want to explore and the values in applying it, and also take care of discuss some of the challenges that we face in it. So I have an outline of the presentation. We'll start off by talking about the definitions. What do you mean by participatory? What do you mean by stakeholders? What do you mean by evaluation? And then we'll go ahead and talk about stakeholder involvement in development processes, particularly stakeholder involvement in evaluation. And then we have a description of what participatory evaluation is. We'll talk about the advantages of using participatory evaluation. We also discuss the disadvantages in using participatory evaluation. Then we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the requirements, what we need to put in place to ensure successful implementation of stakeholder evaluation, and the kinds of decisions that we need to make when we want to undertake participatory stakeholder evaluation. And then I'll go ahead and give you an example of what we have done in the past. I'll just pick a donor-funded community development program and tell you the steps that we went through in undertaking participatory stakeholder evaluation on that project. So let's get started. When we look at the definitions of the keywords, the first one says participatory. Slide change, please. The first one says participatory. And what do we mean when we use the word participatory? It's allowing people to take part in or become involved in an activity. That's what we mean when we talk about participatory. Stakeholders. Who are stakeholders? Both an interest in and that are affected by a project, policy, or organization. Those are the people that we refer to as stakeholders. They have interest or are affected by the project. Evaluation. Evaluation is the periodic and objective process of diagnosing a project, assessing as systematically and objectively what's not working and why the things that are working, those that are not working, why are they not working? Usually when you have a project, you have a theory of change, during evaluation, you want to find out your theory, is it correct? What are the issues? The theory is not correct. If you are not achieving your objective and you've taken into consideration all the activities. So when we do evaluation, it allows us to test if our initial assumptions are right or wrong. It allows us to do a proper review of project implementation, taking into consideration the objectives and the resources that we have used. And we also incorporate into it lessons learned so that future activities can benefit from what we have done in the. Next slide, please. Now, when it is now very, very valuable to involve stakeholders in the different aspects of development. There are lots of attempts to involve stakeholders in different aspects, starting from the design of projects to managing projects and also evaluating projects. So stakeholder involvement approaches have become the order of the day in development work. With respect to evaluation, there are three major aspects of stakeholder involvement, three major approaches. One is collaborative evaluation, two is participatory evaluation, and three is empowerment evaluation. Three major ones. And then these approaches talk about the involvement of the relative involvement of the evaluator and the different stakeholders in the whole process of evaluation. Collaborative evaluation, participatory evaluation, and empowerment evaluation. We'll take them one by one, just by definition, so that we understand what we are talking about. In collaborative evaluation, the evaluator is in charge of the process, but he gets input and support from the different stakeholders of the project. That way, stakeholders are allowed to take part in the design, in different data collection and analysis, but the key thing is that the evaluator is in charge. The relative involvement of the stakeholders depends on what is required and the capacity of the evaluator, but the capacity of the stakeholders. But like I said, the evaluator is in charge. What this does is that the stakeholders to have some level of ownership, and contribution to the whole process. In participatory evaluation, the evaluator and the stakeholders work together to get the evaluation done. It is the two of them that are involved in the whole process. Evaluator and stakeholder work together, with the evaluator basically, but also taking part in the process. Now, when we talk about stakeholders' involvement, there are different stakeholder groups with different capacities, and their level of involvement will depend on the skills that they have, the context of the process of the whole project, and the ability and the requirements of the different tasks in the evaluation process. The last one is the empowerment evaluation. In empowerment evaluation, it is the stakeholders that are in charge of the evaluation. The evaluator just provides some is on track, it is rigorous, it is responsive, and it is relevant. So the stakeholders are the ones that carry out the evaluation. So we have three. Collaborative, where the evaluator is the one that is doing it with some support and involvement of the stakeholders. Participatory, where the two of them are doing it. And empowerment, where the stakeholders are the ones doing it with support and the coaching and mentoring from the evaluator. But the one that we are going to talk about today is the stakeholders' involvement, it is the stakeholders' evaluation. So, stakeholders, let's dig down a little bit into stakeholders, participatory stakeholders evaluation. Participatory stakeholder evaluation is an approach that provides for the active involvement of stakeholders in the evaluation process. The process is designed by and for the people involved in the program, as well as its funders. So all the stakeholders are involved: the funder, the beneficiaries, and all the other people that have any part to play in the program. Now, stakeholders are given an opportunity to provide input into the process to the extent of their. including agreeing on the objectives of the evaluation, deciding how to frame the questions to be asked, who and how to undertake the process, and how to measure outcomes and impacts. What happens is that the data is collected and analyzed by stakeholders, and the conclusions are reached together by the stakeholders. What you now get is that the recommendations that result from this process is owned by the stakeholder, because they are the ones that come up with the recommendations. So you don't need to now carry a consultant's recommendation and try to advocate to stakeholders that, hey, this is what we need to do going forward on this project. Because the stakeholders were involved in it, they were part of it. Actually, they were the people who made the recommendations on the project. So the critical characteristics of this process are that, one, as you can imagine, you really need a skilled facilitator who will act as catalyst, as teacher, and he will assist stakeholders in the evaluation process. So you really require a facilitator that is very, very capable. To mute everybody and then get back because there's some. Okay. Now, another characteristic is that the process ensures that stakeholders undertake the tasks involved in the evaluation process to make sure that they focus on and own the process. The process will be owned by the stakeholder because they are the ones undertaking the activities involved in the process. Now, it may, because you are dealing with, sometimes you deal with several stakeholder groups, it may involve negotiation to agree on the scope of the evaluation, on the questions to ask, on the respondents, and on the way you do the different things there. Mind you, stakeholders are human beings, they come up with their own biases and ideas and things like that. So you really need a facilitator who can put all this together and navigate around it and be able to come up with joint ideas that everybody agrees. A lot of learning on the part of many of the stakeholders, because normally, many of these stakeholders are not involved in the technical part of development work like evaluation. So certain areas may not be known to them, and certain skills that may be needed in some of the tasks that are involved in the evaluation process. As you can imagine, since you are bringing on board different kinds of stakeholders, it requires some level of flexibility so that you bring in the different perspectives and have agreement on how to move on the different aspects of the process. This kind of program, this kind of process is usually very good on ongoing projects where the learning is necessary for continuation of the project, and where beneficiaries are very important in carrying out the activities of the project, because they are involved in the evaluation, in the learning. They know what is required to move forward. Right from the evaluation process, it's a lot easier to make change, to make improvement in the project going forward. So those are the characteristics. Let's look forward and look at the advantages of using this process. The advantages of using participatory evaluation process. Now, project stakeholders are the key actors of the process. Thus, the process incorporates stakeholders' questions and a wide variety so that the end result does not reflect a single stakeholder bias or narrow interpretation. And this is extremely important. There is input from beneficiaries who have more knowledge and experience of the project and the local needs that are being addressed by the project. they have input into the process. If you were to just get an evaluator to go ahead and do it, the kinds of inputs and perspectives of beneficiaries may not be fully embedded in the process and the results. Now, this process also enhances relevance. It enhances ownership and the utilization of the results that come from the process. Because like I said, you do not need to convince those who took part in the evaluation about the results of the evaluation because they were part of it. It promotes communication, collaboration, relationship building, partnerships, and networking among stakeholders well beyond the evaluation process. Because the relationships that are built go beyond the process and can actually fit into the project going forward. You also use this process to build capacity of stakeholders. And it also involves them in determining the future plans on the project. Skills and feelings of self-worth and confidence are also enhanced. And this can be very, very important in community development projects where you have beneficiaries who are not that skilled, who may not have enough confidence when it comes to development work. They now feel that, yes, we can be part of, we can do this, you know, and it has a lot of value to ownership of the project and to their contribution to the project. That way, the process can be a powerful agent for change, not only within the project, but also within the stakeholders who are involved in the project. And as you know, that is extremely important because you need people to carry out changes when development work is about changing so many things, attitudes, particularly when attitudes become very important to the project. Let's talk a little bit about the disadvantages because there are some disadvantages, and that's probably why a lot of people do not consider using the process. It requires a lot of resources, including time and commitment of many stakeholders. As you can see, we are bringing a lot of stakeholders to look at different aspects of the process. So it's not just the evaluators that are involved, but different stakeholders. Getting them to commit the time to the different tasks can also be a big issue. You can also imagine that you are not just going to use any facilitator, you have to use a skilled facilitator who understand and has experience in multi-stakeholder processes, who can deal with conflict issues, who can undertake capacity building. It may be more than one facilitator, but the group of facilitators have to have those capacities. There is need for capacity building and alignment of purpose for stakeholders. That is not easy to achieve sometimes. You need to identify acceptable practices and methods with multiple stakeholders that have varied skills and availability and possibly contrasting values and objectives, and that can be tough. It is difficult sometimes to get people to forget their biases and start looking at issues objectively. Now, another thing is, it may be difficult sometimes to identify and agree on who gets involved in what aspects of the process. We'll take a look at the process later, and you will see that different skills will be required on different tasks. Now, when it comes to analyzing the data that you collect, it's sometimes very difficult and problematic to get people to forget their biases and look at data objectively. We normally tell them that they are supposed to be ambassadors of the data. Remove the objective, just let the data speak to you and tell us what the data is saying. And it takes some effort to be able to get to do that. And like you can imagine, it requires some compromises, working down with multiple stakeholders, and it may lead to watering down some aspects of the process which may affect quality. It requires skilled facilitation to avoid that kind of challenge. Next slide, please. Now, the requirements for a successful implementation. Number one, very important, good facilitation. Number two, the facilitator should have good knowledge of the stakeholders, their capabilities to undertake different assignments in the process. That way, he will be able to understand who should be involved in what. If a facilitator does not have a good understanding of the knowledge, alignment in terms of who does what may be a bit problematic. It's also very, very helpful if the stakeholders already have built some trust and open relationships that are necessary to sustain meaningful participation in the process. If the relationships are good, it's easy to find alignment. If not, then you need to start resolving issues. The facilitator, we have a lot more work to do. And the process is very, very good for projects that emphasize or practice participation of stakeholders in project implementation. As you can imagine, if a project is already very much involving stakeholders in the implementation, then using this process enhances the chances of success on the project. Let's now take a deeper look at what needs to be done when we are adopting this process. Some of critical decisions have to be made in order to ensure that the process is effective and efficient. One, what's the purpose of involving specific stakeholders? And what type and level of involvement will those stakeholders have in the process? These are critical decisions that have to be made along the way, actually at the beginning of the process, and this involves the facilitator and those financing the process. The level of participation of the different stakeholder groups will depend on what we are trying to achieve, the capacity and the skills of the different stakeholder groups, and the important thing is to design the process transparently so that you are able to explain who is involved in what. Some stakeholders may be involved in all the steps. Some may not be involved in some of the steps, maybe because of time, because of skills, but they are kept informed of what is happening on in the process. And some are trained to bring up their capacity so that they can participate in some of the activities. So it is done in a transparent way, and whatever choices are made are done together and explained so that every stakeholder involved in it will understand why that approach is being taken. The process that we take in conducting the process is we start and say, what are we evaluating? What is being evaluated? Why is the evaluation being done? Who will need to use the evaluation results when it is completed? What purpose will stakeholder participation serve in this evaluation? Who should be involved in what task and why? What needs to be put in place to ensure efficient and effective participation in stakeholder participation of the stakeholders in the evaluation process, in the different tasks there? These are questions that you need to deal with in kicking off a stakeholder evaluation process. I will try to get us to take a look at an example of the process undertaken in the donor-sponsored community development project, that we've done in the past. There are 10 steps that are taken, 10 steps. The first one is the framing meeting, where you frame the scope. We will look at each of these steps in a little detail. The next one is the strategy session. And then you have the planning workshop. The planning workshop is the engine room of the process, of the evaluation process. Extremely important workshop. And it involves the maximum number of the stakeholders. Then you get the updating of the tools for the evaluation. This is mainly done by the facilitator or evaluator. Then you come and train field workers who will undertake data collection. Then data collection exercise takes place. They will prepare field reports. There will now be a collation workshop so that you can present the data that is collected in a form that can be analyzed by stakeholders. And then you have your analysis workshop and then your report preparation. Let's now go and take a look at these tasks or activities one by one. The framing meeting. The framing meeting is actually undertaken by the donor and the facilitator. And basically what they are trying to do is to develop a roadmap and a general framework for the evaluation process. At the end of the meeting, they will have a fully developed scope for the evaluation. We also have some level of agreement on which stakeholder group will participate in which task and who the evaluation will serve and why. And they will talk a lot of, they will also come up with the requirements for the evaluation, what resources are required in terms of time, money, skills, etc. Now, the way the process is done, one task feeds into the other. So the framing meeting and the outcomes of the framing meeting will feed into the strategy session. Now the strategy session will have the donor, the facilitator, and some critical stakeholders. And the strategy session may be 1 or 2 day session where you articulate the prospects and assess the probable challenges of implementing the evaluation. It will involve a plan for the total evaluation, including planning the planning workshop. Like I said, the planning workshop is very critical to the process. You will draw up an agenda for the planning workshop. You will have workshop format. You will develop draft tools for the evaluation. Because the facilitator is key here, you come up with draft tools. You develop lists of stakeholders to participate in the evaluation process, and then you review and agree on the budget for the workshop. So that at the end of the planning of the strategy session, you have the objectives of the evaluation very clearly drawn. You have draft tools for the survey work that's going to be involved. You have the draft program for the planning workshop, and you have some draft budgets. Now, the next thing is the planning workshop, and that is extremely important. This is where you take a decision on what needs to be done. You have agreement on the details of the data collection, which is very key. And the participants are the donor, the facilitator, and the largest group of stakeholders that will be involved in the process. This where you have the largest group of stakeholders taking part in the task within the process. And the workshop will define the methodology for the evaluation. It will develop the goals and strategies for the evaluation. It will agree on the tools and other necessary guidelines for the evaluation. It will determine which stakeholders will be interviewed. There will be agreement on the reporting format and also on the communication strategy, such that at the end of the planning workshop, we have the survey tools and guidelines. We have the work plan and timetable for the survey. We have the locations for data collection. We have who will be involved in what as far as data collection is concerned. We have a format for the evaluation reports. We also have a communication plan for the reports and outcomes of the evaluation. So this planning workshop, like I said, very key. And the first 2 steps before the planning workshop really feed into the planning workshop. After the planning workshop, you are ready to go to update the tools and for data collection. So he has work to do there. He's the only one that does it, gets the standardized tools. And then the next step is that there will be training of data collectors. The data collection team will be trained, And those data collection team will also most likely involve some stakeholders with requisite capacity. Some of them may not have the good enough capacity for collecting data. That's why the training is done. The training is also supposed to allow some shared understanding of the evaluation process, the objectives, the interview protocols, the format, the roles and responsibilities of different team members, the quality and ethical issues will be agreed on. There will be agreement on travel and other logistical details during the training. And after the training, we get to the field and undertake data collection. Now, data collection will be done mostly and primarily by the facilitator and the data collection team. Like I said, the data collection team will include some of the stakeholders, and they will go out, use the different conventional methods for data collection, questionnaire administration, focus group discussions, key informant interviews, case studies, whatever has been decided are the best ways to collect data that will be used in evaluating the project or program. At the end of data collection, you have your raw data that is collected from the field. And shortly after the data collection, you will get the data collection team to prepare their field reports. And basically, they will use the guidance that have been provided by the planning committee. The template will have been given to them. They come up with their data collection reports that will include the data collected, the challenges they encountered, how they overcome the challenges, all sorts of details about the data collection efforts. Now we will now go to the collation workshop. And this can be a very, very important step. The collation workshop is the facilitator and the leaders of the data collection sub teams that will do this. They will collect the data along appropriate themes without injecting any personal opinion on biases. And this can be quite critical, particularly when you are dealing with qualitative data. The quantitative data will also be collated in a form that ordinary people who are going to do the analysis will understand. If there are issues that need to be taken care of, like, disaggregated data will be there, maybe along gender lines, along lines of profession, along stakeholder lines. This will be done at the collation team, just to collate the data, so that at the end of it, you have collated data that will now be presented for analysis. And after the collation workshop, we have the analysis workshop. The analysis workshop is the participants there are usually the same participants that undertook the planning workshop, the same people. They will now sit down. They will review the collated data with the aim of highlighting and extracting useful information from it. This may require some training because some people may not have the skills to be able to, bring out inferences from the data that they are seeing. So some training may take place at the beginning of the analysis workshop. But this analysis workshop will be the place that will really come up with the consensus among of gaps and suggestions for improvement of the project. And some of the things that we've done in the past is to get the stakeholder groups to come up with commitment to action. The evaluation, this is the commitment we are making in order for get going forward. So you already get the stakeholders committee to some changes based on the results from the evaluation. And then we are going to communicate the outcome of the evaluation to critical stakeholders and some of the other to the outside world if they decide to communicate such. So the analysis workshop becomes very, very important in getting buy-in to the results going to prepare reports, and that's the work of the facilitator. But before the report of the facilitator comes out, as you can see, the stakeholders already know what is involved in the evaluation, what the results are, what the recommendations are, what they need to change. Which we have done in the past, stakeholder participatory evaluation here in Nigeria. I want to thank you for
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Obafemi Ajibola. Looks like we're having a bit of technical issues with him, but fortunately he had concluded his presentation. Well, okay, I see 2 hands up. We were going to leave questions till the end of the panel discussion, but maybe we'll just take these 2 hands. And then I also have a question from Chikeze Okpara. We'll take those 3. If you have more questions after that, please type them in the chat box. We'll take them after the panel discussion. We're going to be starting the panel discussion shortly. But I'm going to allow Omori John to have the floor. Please ask your question, Omori John.
Greetings. If you can hear me, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can.
Okay. Wonderful presentation and a laudable training for monitoring and evaluation officers. I work with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD Life ND project in Edo State. I'm the state monitoring and evaluation officer. Please, in a quick one, please, how can we get these presentations via our emails? Because it's a very eye-opening training session. Please, the materials for this training, how can we get it? It will help.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Okay, great. Yes, thank you very much. We're going to send the presentation to all the participants. So please kindly type in your contact details in the box chat. We'll send the presentations to you.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you. And for those joining us on our YouTube channel, please type in your contact information and your name. We will get the information across to you. So we're going to take I see another hand up. Ayelola Bakwil. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that name well, but please, you have the floor. Ayelola Bakwil, you have the floor, please. Please unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Unmute him. Okay, so while we wait for him, I'll just ask the question written by Chikeze Okpara. Chikeze Okpara says, how can you manage participatory evaluation when the major target stakeholders are local rural farmers who care little or less of your project management process, but they benefit from the interventions? So that question is going to be taken by Professor Ajibola. Maybe I should ask it again. How can you manage participatory evaluation when the major targets stakeholders are local rural farmers who care little or less of your project management process or the evaluation, but the intervention, they benefit from the intervention.
Okay, thank you very much. If you are going to do any type of evaluation, you are going to have to interact with these local farmers anyway. So you are going to ask them questions about what has happened in the evaluation process. I mean, in the projects, how the project has affected them. So they will have some involvement in the evaluation. What we are saying about participatory stakeholder evaluation is that they be part of the process. Now, if they are rural farmers, usually they will have leaders who can take part in one thing or the other. So they may be part of their leaders can easily be part of the planning and the analysis workshops. We have examples, for example, where we have dealt with community projects, community development projects in rural areas. And usually their leaders are, literate enough to be part of the planning process, to also take part in the analysis. See, the data will be presented to them in forms that they can really understand, and they can make a contribution, and they can own the results of the process. So they will have to care about the process, because it affects and impacts on their lives. And what this process does is that, what the participatory process does is to get them involved in decision making. And I don't think they will, object to being part of the decision that will affect their lives and their livelihoods. So it does happen that we do have a situation in which community leaders are involved in participation, not only evaluation, but also even in planning of projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope, Chikeze Okpara, I hope you're satisfied with that response. Ayeloja Backwell, are you on now? I see you're still raising your hand. If you can, please kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, so please type your questions in the question chat. We will take the questions after the panel discussion. Thank you very much, sir, Professor Obafemi Ajibola, Executive Director of New Nigeria Foundation, for a very robust presentation. Thank you, sir. We're going to be going to the second session of this webinar, which is the panel discussion. We've gone through some training on participatory stakeholder evaluation, and I want to believe that we've increased our knowledge on participatory stakeholder evaluation. We're going to be going on to panel discussion, and I want to introduce the speakers. We have 3 experts who will be speaking with us. They have experience in the use of participatory stakeholder evaluation, and they're going to be sharing from their wealth of experience with us this morning. I'd like to welcome Mr. Sam Daibo. Mr. Sam Daibo is Chevron Nigeria Limited's Area Manager, Policy, Government and Public Affairs Field Operations. He leads stakeholder engagement efforts for CNL in 3 states where the company has footprints, and he provides leadership for the company's operations in Warri, Yenagoa offices, and manages a workforce of over 800 personnel. Dr. Dara Akala. Dr. Dara Akala is a development economist with over 40 years of multi-layered experience across Nigeria. He has also worked in Central and East Africa and the United Kingdom. He was Senior Program Manager at Living Earth Foundation UK, and he was the Founding Executive Director for Living Earth Nigeria Foundation. Dr. Akala is currently the Executive Director of Foundation for Partnership Initiatives in the Niger Delta, which is popularly known as PAINT Foundation. Mrs. Olaide Adesoya. Mr. Laide Adesanya is a development practitioner with over 30 years of experience and expertise across several areas, including design, implementation, evaluation of projects, and facilitation of multi-stakeholder initiatives. She's a deputy director and head of programs department at New Nigeria Foundation. It's my pleasure to welcome all our panelists, and I would like to say a very big thank you to them for taking out time from their very, very busy schedule to join us today. Welcome, everyone. So my first question, wait. I'm going to be directing my first question at all the panelists. And what we'd like to know is, what's the rationale? Why did your organizations, why did they think it was important for them to adopt the use of participatory stakeholder evaluation? And to bell the cat or to start the conversation, I'm going to be calling on the only beautiful lady in the midst of amongst the panelists, Olaide Adesanya. Please tell us, what do you think was the rationale? Why didn't New Nigeria Foundation, think it was important to adopt that method?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. NNF is a development organization that has a lot of experience when it comes to facilitation and implementation of participatory evaluation. So after 15 years of operation, in 2015, the foundation decided to evaluate itself to find out how well it has performed, what are the things that we need to improve, what are the things that we're doing well. And we thought that a good way to do it was to involve everyone who has a stake in NNF. So we had the primary stakeholders. When I say primary stakeholders, I mean the board, management, staff of the foundation. And then we also involved what I'll term the secondary stakeholders. These are partners, our clients, our service providers. We brought everybody together. Let's do an assessment of New Nigeria Foundation after 15 years of operations. So we thought it was important. You see, unlike when you get an individual to do an assessment, he's just going to look at what you have done and come up with his or her opinion in terms of how well you have done. But unlike when you bring the stakeholders of the organization to do an assessment, they have a stake in it. It gives them the sense that we are in this together to find out how well we have done or the things that we need to improve. So NNF did this, involved the board members, involved the beneficiaries, even former staff were involved in this evaluation. So at the end of it, we found out that everybody had a good understanding of New Nigeria Foundation, even those that had never worked with us. They understood our programs, they understood our procedures, our processes. So one, it provided everyone an even playing ground in terms of the assessments. It was open, it was transparent. While that assessment was going on, the evaluation process, because it was participatory, provided capacity building to everyone that was involved. You see, ordinarily, the average person, when it comes to assessment, is prone to finding faults. He's going in with the mind of, okay, let me find out what is wrong in this project or in this system. That is the beauty of having a participatory evaluation. Everybody has a stake. So I am not going in as a stakeholder to find out what my faults are. It was coming from the appreciative inquiry approach to find out, okay, this organization has been on for 15 years. They must have done some things well along the line. So let's find out what are the things that they have done well. What are the things that have worked for them? What are the areas that they need to improve? And that was the basis of that evaluation for NNF. At the end of the day, everyone was enriched. It provided opportunity for even staff of NNF that ordinarily would not have been involved when we're carrying out that kind of participatory evaluation for clients. So it built their capacity. The stakeholders also had their capacity built. Then everybody had a sense of stakeholdership. It was, this is our own. They had, you didn't have to convince them to have a buy-in because they were involved in the planning of the evaluation and the workshops that led to even defining the themes of the evaluation, because it talks about the internal processes of NNF. It talks about how we relate with with clients. It talked about how we respond to them when we're implementing projects. So I think at the end of the day, everybody had the sense that going through that route of having a participatory evaluation helped us to ensure that everybody's opinion in terms of how we're doing was brought to the fore. So at the end of the day, we could learn lessons in terms of how to improve our operations.
Okay, thank you very much, Laide. Before I call on our other two panelists, we're going to take two poll questions. Would like to know from the audience, those who are familiar with participatory stakeholder method and those who have been involved in the process. So if you don't mind, kindly take a short time, everyone, to answer this question. The first poll question is, are you familiar with the participatory stakeholder evaluation method? Just click the appropriate response, yes or no, and then we'll get the results immediately. So I'll just give us a few, 2-3 seconds to do that. Okay, still waiting. About 35 people have responded. Can we have more people respond, please? Are you familiar with the participatory stakeholder method? Okay. So let's see the results. Great. So more than half of us, 67% of participants in this webinar are familiar with the method, which is really good to know. So we're going to be sharing from experience. We'll hopefully be getting comments from people who have used the method and who can also share experience with us. We'll take the second poll question. The second poll question is, have you ever participated in a participatory stakeholder evaluation process? Have you ever been involved in a participatory stakeholder evaluation process? That's the method that Professor Ajibola described to us now. So kindly take a few minutes or a few seconds to respond to that, please. Okay, we'll have the results now. Great. So again, more than half, about 66% of people in this webinar have been involved in the participatory stakeholder evaluation, while we have 34 people who have not. So I hope that those who have not been involved in the process are benefiting from this process. And I also hope that those who have been involved, can add 1 or 2 knowledge or additional knowledge to what they already have, and will be willing to also have them share their experiences with us. Thank you, everyone. We'll take a third poll later on. So now I'll go on to Mr. Sam Daibo. Please tell us the rationale for Chevron Nigeria Limited's interest in adopting participatory stakeholder evaluation as a method.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to share our own experience with this special tool or process for doing evaluation. We call us as an oil and gas company, we're also in the space where we do corporate social investments in communities, and also where we also do community engagement and have a process for doing that. Way back in 2005, when we developed a community engagement model, which we christened the GMOU, basically standing for Global Memorandum of Understanding. This defined our platform, our process for engaging our stakeholder communities. So that model was introduced in 2005, and we ran it for about 3 years, and then recognized the need for us to go into another generation of signing MOUs. And for us, we felt that at that time, what would be the best approach for us to get the true sense of what the impact of that community engagement model is having in the communities. and then how it has improved or otherwise of the status of our relationship with our neighboring communities. Recognizing that prior to that, we're just coming out of the ethnic crisis that happened between 2005, 2003, up to 2003, 2005, and were negatively impacted in the course of those ethnic conflicts. And so that's when we became familiar with this. We got introduced with this participatory stakeholder evaluation process. And what that helped us to do was that it enabled us to, one, be able to engage and work with our communities and get their own feel in terms of what their real assessment of that tool was. Bearing in mind too that for us, at that time, we're in a place where the level of trust between the company and the communities was not a very high, this got a very high number on a scale. And two, there's also the risk that even if we go, because in that evaluation, we're going to pay for it. And so with the risk of, if you paid for it, the committee will say, look, whatever the outcome is because you're paying the consultant or paying the persons who are going to do that and to come out to results. So whatever it is, it's going to be as you wanted it to be. So the participatory stakeholder evaluation became an effective tool in managing those perceptions. And so we went through the process as Prof outlined earlier on, in first of all, engaging and allowing both community stakeholders, government, NGOs to participate from the process of even defining the nature and the nature and objectives of that evaluation, including defining the questions and data analysis and all of that. And so it became an interesting process for us because we're also getting used to it. That was the first time we're actually dealing with it. And some of us were actually engaged in that process. So you can see the dynamics in the room when we did the planning workshop and even when we did the data analysis. So that provided us opportunity in data analysis space. I mean, you can see the raw data coming in from the communities. And so even where there are shortfalls or shortcomings, where ordinarily community folks will say, Chevron, company, you're responsible for that problem, or company will say, community, you're responsible for that. You can see that it's actually coming from the data was actually speaking to it, and everybody, the community folks, the government the officials in the room, the NGOs in the room, were all seeing the data at the same time, analyzing the data at the same time, and coming up with outcomes. So what that did for us was, one, the outcome of that process was owned by everybody. There was this sense of transparency in it. So nobody will say, yes, it is your own, you walked it towards an answer, but everybody was part of it. And so the outcome was jointly owned, and the process was transparent, and people could see that, yes, this is how, and they saw that their own inputs, their own thoughts were expressed and also incorporated in the outcomes of the process. And so, and when we went through all of that and the outcomes of that, like Prof said earlier on, we didn't have to wait for the final report for everybody to know what to do with that. And so all of that fed into that generation of GMOUs that we went into sign. And that, of course, helped in processing and smoothing the transition from the old GMOU agreements into the next generation, because everybody could see that they were part of that process, and that there was a need for us to have a continuous improvement process in place. And then there was ownership, and then there was trust and relationship that came out of all that process. So that's what I'd like to share at this point. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daibo. I would like to go on to Dr. Dara. Dr. Dara, kindly share the experience of PIN Foundation. What was the rationale for selecting or adopting the method? And maybe you might also be able to speak to the question asked earlier by Chimeze about, the relevance to rural stakeholders, if you have any experience along that line. Over to you, sir.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Bumi, and good morning to everyone listening in from Nigeria, West Africa, and good afternoon to our friends that have joined us from East Africa. And again, thanks to NNF for giving us an opportunity on this platform to share experiences in the application of participatory stakeholder evaluation methods in PIN Foundation. Our foundation was established by Chevron Corporation in year 2010, and our mission is to promote sustainable and inclusive economic development and peace and stability in the Niger Delta region. We receive our funding in 5-year cycles. So the first funding phase was from 2010 to 2014. As we were approaching the end of that phase, we took a deliberate decision to carry out a participatory stakeholder evaluation to demonstrate, the impact and results of the 5-year funding, primarily to our donor, and then, of course, to enable all stakeholders to contribute to the process of teasing out what is working in PIN Foundation, how are the programs affecting lives and people in the region, what is not working so well that would need to be improved as we're approaching the second phase. So every 5 years it has become a tradition to carry out a strategic review that involves the participation of all our stakeholder groups. And of course, we've enumerated a lot of them here today: government, donor partners, implementing partners, even internal stakeholders, the staff, and the board and management of PIN Foundation. So everybody's looking at the overall context of PIN's operations, how are the programs working, and what effects and what outcomes and results are we getting from this, and what's the overall impact? How is PIN being perceived in the region, and beyond? So these are some of the things that we were looking at during our strategic review. And why did we choose this evaluation method as opposed to the traditional approaches to evaluation, whereby we bring in an evaluator, a consultant who leads into the process, comes in, works about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever duration, writes a report, and goes away. We chose this method because, one, it promotes a lot of learning and it enables knowledge retention within the foundation. Because our staff were involved, because we are also involved, there are lots of exposures to different aspects of different stakeholder groups that are working with PIN, that without our staff taking part in these processes, they would not have had that level of exposure and engagement with stakeholders. So it enabled a well-rounded view of the foundation and the extent of its networks and the areas of and spheres of influence, in the course of the implementation of our programs and projects in the Niger Delta region. If it had been done by an evaluator or a consultant, he will come, he will learn a lot of things, and at the end of the day, when the assignment is completed, he goes away with the bulk of the learning because he cannot capture everything in a short report. Even these days, we are limiting evaluation reports to about 40 or 50 pages because people don't want to read very lengthy reports. So that was a major reason for us adopting the participatory stakeholder evaluation method, because all stakeholders learning together and we're solving issues and discussing approaches with regards to how to improve implementation and program activities in the next phase. The other rationale for choosing it is that it presents an opportunity to give voice to the voiceless and those that are usually not consulted or heard in this process. And this responds directly to the question that was asked earlier on. When we're looking at various stakeholder groups, that includes beneficiaries, other project participants, bringing their representatives into the room, even right from the planning stage to analysis stage, even involving them in various groups at the data collection stage, focus group discussions and key informant interviews, enable these folks that are usually not heard to contribute to the success of the entire strategic review. And we've done this time and time again, the last one being in 2019. So if we did not go this, take this approach, then it is not likely that these people, the grassroots folks who have been involved, to the extent that we have involved them in this, in the strategic review. So that is these are some of the reasons why we chose this approach as to other methods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akala. I'm going to go on to the second question for panelists, and I'm going to go back to Laide. How can different stakeholder groups benefit from adopting participatory stakeholder method? I know that different people joining us today, some are government officials, some are CSOs, some from private sector. So we would like to look at how the different stakeholders can benefit. Well, please talk about your experience from the CSO perspective, and maybe you would also want to say a bit about how the academic community and research institutions can also benefit from using the participatory stakeholder evaluation method.
Thank you. How can CSOs benefit by using PSC? I think in undertaking the evaluation of NNF as a civil society organization, it helps us to display a high level of transparency and accountability with our stakeholders. CSOs are usually in the forefront of advocacy in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability. I think adopting the participatory stakeholder evaluation approach helps to actually show that we are walking the talk. We're displaying transparency and accountability in our operations, because bringing people who are external stakeholders to come in and evaluate your system says a lot about your transparency. And NNF, one of our 5 core values is transparency and accountability. So it was us living what we preach. So I think that's something CSOs can learn from. And then the PSC also encourages participatory decision-making process, because putting everybody out together in a room, looking at your internal processes, looking at your vision, looking at your mission, looking at what you have done over a 15-year period, gives an opportunity for a sound evaluation of your system. So it helps people to help you reach decisions in terms of how to move forward, what you need to change, what you need to continue doing, what you need to improve on. And then the fact that it involved even non-programmatic staff helped to bring some level of inclusion into our operations. So, and it helped to show the whole world the kind of egalitarian leadership that was practiced in NNF and that's still being practiced in NNF. So it's helped to encourage a participatory decision-making process, and it's also ensured that in evaluating NNF using the PSL, we had many meetings that helped people to impute into the process. So it wasn't a question of NNF had decided what they want to do and they brought people in. No, we had preparatory meetings, we had planning workshops, and everybody jointly agreed in terms of what objectives are we going to achieve at the end of the day, what themes do we really want to include in the evaluation, and it opened us up. So it added to the credibility of being Nigeria Foundation that we could open our doors for people to actually do some kind of evaluation of our systems in terms of how we operate. I think it was good for us as a civil society organization, and it showed that we do not just have transparency and accountability as a core value, we're actually living it. Then it also helped to engender inclusion. Everybody had a stake. It gave everybody a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership. It gave people who were involved, especially the external stakeholders, a kind of sense of self-worth in terms of the operations of New Nigeria Foundation. So I think it was good that we adopted that approach, and it shows that we are really a credible organization. Then in terms of how academic community or research institutions can integrate PSC, I think the use of PSC approaches is important for one, guiding local decision-making, two, promoting implementation of effective interventions and addressing emerging issues. So when you bring people in, they actually have an opportunity to look at the whole process and proffer solutions in terms of how to move forward. And if we are going to advocate that the academic community and research institutions integrate PSC, it is important that there is some kind of interrelationship between town and gown. So that in designing the research, it is important that those who are going to use the skills, those who are going to use this method are sure that their wants, their needs are being programmed into the development of the curriculum for these research institutions, so that people who actually go through these programs in the university, when they come out and say, I have gone through a course in participatory stakeholder evaluation, those that are going to work for would actually have that assurance that the needs that they have as users of this evaluation method have been taken into consideration in training these people. So it is important when we are going to do this advocacy for that inclusion, that we talked about getting the people who are eventually going to use the methodology to sit together with the academic institution in terms of designing, in terms of agreeing what pedagogical strategy to use to ensure that at the end of the day, the graduates come out and meet the needs of those who will use the evaluation method. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go back to Mr. Daibo now. Mr. Sam Daibo, kindly share your experience from the private sector perspective. How did it benefit your organization? How did the PSA method, how do you think it will benefit, let's be general now, how do you think the PSC will benefit the private sector as a sector?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So let me start off by saying, look, it's not how did it benefit, how does it continue to benefit us? Because for us, we found it as a very valuable tool or a process for measuring the impact of our CSIs or corporate social investments, which we do under our corporate social responsibility portfolio. And that's one. And it also, as a company, help us to appreciate in deeper levels the impact of our community engagement model, which we, like I said, introduced onto the platform into the space since 2005. And over the years, at the end of every 3-4 years, we do an evaluation of that process and keep improving. And I can tell you, as a company, that from what was seen in 2005, when we introduced that model to what we have today is a big difference. And that's because of the process we followed in evaluating the model and also applying the learnings from the evaluation into building the next generation of the GMOUs. I mean, just as a way of commenting, and that if you look at the current host community component of the PIB as it's constituted today, a chunk of it actually is modeled after the GMOU model that was generated from within Chevron, and also because of the evaluation process that were followed, you've seen the model that seemed to work pretty well for the industry. So the short answer to your question basically is this: one, the model or the PSE enables us to, one, have a deeper understanding of what's the impact of our investments or the impact of our engagement is from the perspective of stakeholders we engage with and also from the company. And so that enables us also to respond in terms of our decisions in looking at our social impact. Again, us also looking at also business impact, because when we put these social investments or put out this community engagement strategies forward, it's basically to meet two things. One, to meet our business objective, and also to meet the social objective. And there's a social objective, which is basically to improve the quality of livelihood, or quality of living, or relationship of well-being of communities that are neighboring to our operations. So if we run that process, we want to be sure that yes, when we follow a process as elaborate and as detailed as the participatory stakeholder evaluation, it enables us to understand, have a better sense of what stakeholders are thinking, how stakeholders are using, how they're engaging in that space of both our investments or in terms of our community engagement strategy. So once you have a good sense of what that is and build trust, one of the things that we've seen that has come out through this process for us over the years is what we call the unintended benefits of this process is the trust and the level of trust that's been built over the years through using these models, because at times like that there's engagement and then the other stakeholders who ordinarily from the other side of the fence think that as a company, you're too rigid, you're too structured in your decisions and your processes. So when we engage in this process of participatory stakeholder evaluation, and they see that yes, we are genuinely as a company interested in improving the quality of livelihoods, improving the quality of life in those communities, there's a sense of say, yeah, so we understand you better, we understand you as a company better, we know why you do what you do, we see that you do these things for the good, because they're the good things to do, they're nice things to do, they're the good things to do, because it's good to do them. You're not just doing them as something that we just have to do because we are a company just to do it. We do it because it's a good thing to do. And for us, that's a key benefit for us as a company. One of the things too I've seen as benefits from this process is the institutional memory. Dr. Dara spoke a little to it. We as a company have benefited, continue to benefit from that because in this whole process, we have our team members who participate in this process. We're also in there. And so when they start to engage the community thereafter, they own it. They have it. They know what it is. They build personal relationships with stakeholders, both at government, NGO, and the community level. I mean, today I speak in the space of CSR and CSI, largely because of the experiences we've been able to garner in using this participatory stakeholder evaluation process. So thanks. That's what I'd like to share at this point on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Daibo. Before I call on Dr. Dara to share his own experience about what he feels about how government functionaries and donors can benefit from the use of the method, I'd like to also engage the audience. What do we think? I see more than half of us are familiar with this method. What do we think? How do we think politicians, policy makers, those in that space of making decisions in the policy or regarding policy issues, how do we think they can utilize this method more effectively, particularly, as we approach an election period in the next couple of years, so how do politicians, what do we think? Let's share our thoughts. So I'll go on back to Dr. Dara. Dr. Dara, please can you share your thoughts about how you think government functionaries and donors, how do you think they can benefit from the use of this method?
Okay, thanks again, Bumi. Let me start with donors. Many of us will know that PEND is a hybrid organization. We're both an implementer and a donor, but we're a very small donor. So that does not mean that donors that are listening now will not give funds to us or programs when we come asking. So having said that, we know that most donors have an objective of promoting participatory development and involving stakeholders groups in evaluation will help to further that objective. And an effective way for stakeholders to contribute to the achievement of donors' objectives is to directly be involved in the evaluation process of programs and projects. The stakeholders' role will include things like participation in the planning, all these steps or the stages that Prof outlined earlier on in his presentation, in the planning stage, in framing the critical evaluation questions, in data collection, and in analysis of data. All of these are stages that will involve various stakeholder groups, in a participatory evaluation process that is being instituted by donors. If stakeholders are involved this way, then those will enable them to participate directly in the assessment of the relevance and the performance and the success of the programs or projects. And of course, they will take part in recommending how to improve the quality of the current or future interventions that the donors are thinking of. So it's very critical that donors involve all various stakeholder groups in order to get a wide variety of feedback and viewpoints about how programs are working, the effectiveness of these programs, and the relevance of such programs. Then I'll move on quickly to government. Government officials can use the participatory stakeholder evaluation methods in reaching out to the grassroots, or the critical stakeholders involved, and also including the grassroots, and that way, government officials can seek feedback on the performance of the programs and projects, or even policies of government. And this promotes inclusiveness in making decisions about things that will affect the lives of these people. And it also promotes citizens' engagement, in governance. So what we're saying in essence is that the adoption of the participatory stakeholder evaluation methods will promote good governance through increasing accountability, through increasing transparency, and it also helps build trust between government and the citizens. One thing that is in short deficit in Nigeria these days is that there's a trust deficit in the current administration. We've always been having that in the past. And that is because there's not enough engagement that is going on between the citizens and the government. Government is not seeking feedback on how the policies is affecting the lives of those that are being governed. So adopting this method will help government to get feedback on the needs and yearnings and priorities of the citizen, and learnings and outcomes from an evaluation process can be the basis for planning new projects or for the redesign of existing projects. So let me leave it there for now, Bome. Back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I see 2 people have responded, and I'm going to call you, if you don't mind, to share your opinion. I know you've shared your opinion in the chat box, but I'm going to call you, my very special friend and sister, Toyin Akpan, and who else? Okay, and Lydia. So please, Mrs. Toyin Akpan, can you please share your thoughts with us? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've really learned quite a lot from the presenters and also from you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts. I think various governments, and I'll use Lagos State as an example, has tried to implement participatory evaluation as a strategy for open governance. However, just like Dr. Akala said, I think honesty and integrity, willingness to be open and transparent has been the problem most government officials or governments in general have. in adopting participatory evaluation strategies. My suggestion is we already have in Lagos State town hall meetings, which over the past 3 governors have tried to sustain at the community levels. That is a very good platform that can be used to implement this strategy. And so we already have the civil society at that space. We already have the community openly participating at that space. We can actually remove politicking out of the space and bring in transparency and openness into the process, and then include more stakeholders that have been excluded from that process. Because if you get to the town hall meetings, everybody is there living the community, but maybe the policymakers are not there. Maybe those who are actually given the right or the contract to implement some of these activities are not also in attendance when government is meeting the people. And so if that is opened up, the stakeholders' involvement is opened up a lot wider, that may be a good strategy to go. And I also reflected at the political scene and platform, and I thought, we already have open sessions at either the House of Assemblies at the state, the House of Representatives, and then we also have at the Senate. And these open sessions are looking at different specific projects or different policies or laws that are being implemented. So we already are used to this. However, some of the sessions are rowdy when it comes to engagement with civil society or when it comes to engaging with the community generally. Just like now, the experience of people who attended the constitutional review or hearings have been complaining about the openness and the need to embrace conflicting and contentious views. If this strategy is taken up in government, I believe that government will gain a whole lot more in reflections and best strategies to be able to build trust and also meet needs at the community level. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for the opportunity to express them.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Hello?
She has finished presenting. She has finished presentation.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Olubumin. Yes.
Thank you for your feedback, Caleb Wanga. I was calling on Lydia Indieze because she had made a comment or, contributed to this discussion in the chat box. So if Lydia is on, please unmute yourself and share with us.
Hi. Thank you, Bumi. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. And I must say, I really appreciate this opportunity. And thanks to all those who've been talking to us. I've gained a lot personally. And just very quickly on the question you had asked, and our sister before me had just spoken, I just brought out 2 things to myself. I said, yes, we have a lot of town hall meetings. We have engagements, but the talks that we have in those forums, so we really listen to them. We gather the people, we spend the time, hear them talk, but we don't take actions on the things they say. That's where we think also have a problem. So the government comes, does the wishy-washy, does the advertising, everybody knows there's a town hall meeting, but at the end of the day, nothing is taken out of that place. Otherwise, we will have situations where our politicians are able to come back to the drawing board to those same people and say, look, we had a meeting on the 30th, and these were the things we came out with. This is what we have done about it. Please evaluate. Does it meet what we agreed? Is it in line with what we are saying? Because if you're doing a development and it's not benefiting me, then it's not useful to me. I could see it there as a good elephant project, but it's worthless as far as I'm concerned. So if our politicians begin to think straight, one, integrity. What do I want to project? I am here for 2, 3, 4 years. What do I want to be remembered for? What am I leaving behind? I am still a part of this community. I may have the opportunity now to be a leader, but tomorrow I'm going to be back in my own house, plying the roads I didn't do, walking on the streets without lights, and it's going to tell back on me and my children. So let's think, let the politicians begin to think beyond themselves and the quick gains of collecting monies and stashing them abroad, and begin to think of how we can corporately develop our own so that others can come and feel good spending holidays in Port Harcourt or even in Diop for that matter. So what we are preaching is this: stakeholders engagement is so important. Feel the pulse of the people. How do they feel about this? What do they really want? What will encourage development for them? What will help their small industries to grow? Make these things available with the taxes you collect from them, and they will bless you forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for your very passionate thoughts. Thank you very much. I'm going to just give room for one more comment before I go back to our panelists, and then if we have enough time, I'll take other comments. I see more people are making more comments, but I'll ask Caleb Wanga from Kenya to please express or share his thoughts with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Olatunde, for the opportunity. And I'm very happy, and congratulations everybody, Professor Jibola and the team, for organizing this kind of engagement. Participatory evaluation is key, but just the way Lydia, you have heard the tone the Lydia have spoken. Sometimes these public processes are abused. And even in Kenya, sometimes they are badly abused when people are just called to show it's done for public relations exercise. But how important is participatory evaluation? It helps to streamline even projects. And two, that is in the public processes. In the civil society organizations, we have internal evaluations and external evaluations. All these things you realize are intended to improve delivery of services or to enhance the kind of products at the end of any process. But how do we make sure that they are well conceived? Otherwise, public participatory evaluation sometimes, like in Kenya, is done as a public relations exercise. So I've really listened a lot to presentations, and I believe that this kind of engagement will help us improve on our work on a daily basis. Thank you so much, Olatunde.
Okay, thank you so much, Caleb Wanga from Kenya. It's so good to have you join us today. Thank you for your very important thoughts. I want to believe that we have some government officials participating, and I believe that they're listening. This has been very good. I'm going to go back to our panelists. I'll give more opportunities for participants to share their thoughts later on. Well, I'm going to ask again our panelists how their organizations have benefited from using the participatory stakeholder method. This time, I want them to share just one experience, just one point each. So I'm going to go back to Laide. Please share with us just one experience or one example of how NNF has benefited from using PSC method.
Thank you, Bumi. One experience. Well, I think as a program implementer, we've had a number of benefits, but if I need to zero in on one, at times you may believe you're doing so well, you believe you are doing what you're supposed to do, and your stakeholders may not have that impression. So I think after 15 years, when you bring people you have worked with, people who used to work for you, people of whom you have served, to do an evaluation of your organization, it gives you an opportunity to gather their perceptions about us. So when we had that evaluation, that's about 6 years ago, we got people's perception of us as an organization in terms of our vision. Are we actually living our vision, our mission? Are we achieving our mission? Are processes good enough? Are we meeting their needs as partners? Do they think the strategies we have adopted implementing projects are working? What do they think of our staff in terms of response when we're implementing projects? So it gave us an avenue to get feedback from our external stakeholders in terms of what we as INF was doing well, what we needed to improve. It enabled us to know their perception of us in terms of where are our strengths really, where do they think that we were weak? And these discussions, this hard truth helped us to improve our processes. So it enhanced our capacity to fulfill our mission and vision better and to get the best out of the partnership arrangements that we already had going. I think that's one major benefit that we got as an implementer using participatory evaluation method. Thank you.
Thank you, Laide. I'm going to go over to Dr. Dara, and then I'll get back to Mr. Sam Daibo. Dr. Dara, 1 point, please. Just tell us something that Pain Foundation has benefited from using the PSC method. Just 1 point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bumi. I think if there's anything that is of the greatest importance to us from the last PSR that we did, I mean, with the participatory stakeholder evaluation, it was the confirmation of the continued relevance of our mission in the Niger Delta region. So it also helps us to determine our area of priorities. Our strategy derives from our mission. The last review that we did in 2019 actually resulted in the redesign of our program strategy. So from 4 program pillars, we moved down to 2 program pillars because the overwhelming feedback from the various stakeholder groups was the fact that, look, if you want to bring about transformational change in the Niger Delta region, then focus on 2 core pillars of economic development and peace building. The rest, advocacy and analysis and capacity building could be mainstreamed into these 2 core pillars, which was exactly what we have done. So that is a major outcome of the last review that we did. And of course, we didn't have to debate this, both with internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, because we were all part of that process of decision making all along the way from start to finish. So that is one major benefit that I can list here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm going to go straight to Mr. Sam Daibo.
Yeah, so thanks. So for us, beyond the capacity building elements, which we continue to cherish, I think one of the key things that will benefit or will continue to benefit from this process, or from using this process, is the readiness and willingness of partners, particularly community stakeholders and other stakeholders who participate in the process, to take ownership of the outcomes and recommendations from those evaluation processes. Like I mentioned, we've gone through 5 different, the 5 times that we've gone to evaluation of the GMOE model, for instance, and it has been tremendous improvement in terms of its effectiveness, its delivery, its governance, its systems, and then even its own whole approach, and so the willingness of partners to quickly take on the recommendations and run with them. For us, it's a big learning and big benefit for us. I mean, if you look at it vis-a-vis the nature of relationships that you have typically between oil company, the extractive industry, and communities, you understand where I'm coming from in terms of when we see this as a major gain for us as a company that's in that space, the readiness and willingness of that, and that's the reason why that happens is because participants goes to see the process, they see how some difficult questions are asked, and even when something's negative or perceived as negative will come, and it's the willingness of the company to say yes, that's fact.
We don't try to hide or deny or try to leave or accept it for what it is and see a way to improve on the process. So that is for us is a big thing. So the willingness and then the ownership of the process for us at Killian is that we think it continues to encourage us to use this process. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Daibo. We're going to be talking about challenges, and after that, I'm going to take 2 more questions out of the several questions that we have, and then we'll continue with the discussion. So I'm going to be asking our panelists about the challenges that they encountered when they used the method, because it sounds very exciting. It's been a very useful method. It's had a lot of positive impacts, but what were the challenges that you had when you were using that method? I'm going to start with Laide.
Thank you, Bumi. You know, we are a civil society organization, we're a non-governmental organization, so we do not have resources of our own. Our resources are held in trust for other people. So we do not have deep pockets of the private sectors like Chevron or the donors like Paint. So I think one major challenge we had was in terms of resources, especially financial resources. Having to bring so many stakeholders together, we had to provide for the logistics of their participation. It took a lot in terms of financial resources. So one thing I would say is that in terms of resources, as an implementer or somebody who, or an organization that wants to adopt a participatory stakeholder evaluation method, you need to be mindful of budgetary allocation because it takes a lot of funds, a lot of money to actually get stakeholders to participate throughout the process. And then it takes a lot of time to, so those 2 resources are things that you need to be mindful right from your planning stage. One, in terms of financial resources, as a civil society organization, you need to be sure that you can fund the participation of those you are bringing, because you're going to bring stakeholders who are not residents where you're located. There's the logistics that you need to fund. So you need to be mindful of that. And it can be huge for a civil society organization. In terms of time, the process takes a lot of time, right from your framing meetings, your preparatory meetings, your planning workshop, before you get the training done, people going to the field, it takes time. We need there to be sure that the stakeholders that we're bringing on board were willing to commit the time that was required to go through the whole process. So I think for us, the major challenge was funding, like I said, being a non-governmental organization, and then getting people to commit to spending so much time working on the project. So 2 things, stakeholders need to be willing to commit the time required to participate fully and effectively in the evaluation process, and the institution needs to be able to devote the financial resources that is required to fund the participation of the stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go over to Mr. Sam Daibo. Kindly share with us just one challenge.
Okay, so let me share this with you. One of the things we found as a challenge really is, this process requires you bring in different stakeholders, different literacy level, cultural biases, exposures, and all of that. You bring all those persons into one room, and you're looking at and defining a project and defining what the objective of an evaluation would be. And you're also analyzing data. People have different understanding, a different level of appreciation of what that is. And then from the experts to the non-experts to the literate, somebody raised a question about how do you use this process for illiterate farmers? But they are stakeholders, so you bring them in. And so that becomes a challenge. How do you navigate that process of different people with different backgrounds, different experiences, different expectations and biases? How do you navigate all of that, all those emotions, those background, and work it and focus on the process that produces something that is beneficial to everybody? That for us is a challenge and also an opportunity, in which case, if you get a very good facilitator, that helps to navigate through that process very well. And then, of course, even in selecting presentations, and so we say yes. So let's say yes, we want to get community members to participate in this process. Who in the community? How do you select that person? How do you ensure that whoever you bring in doesn't bring, is not a domineering person who says, look, you know what, I have an agenda and you have to run that agenda through and through. And then how do you manage that process? So that's in a sense, what we're saying here is there is the complication of bringing different people with different educational background, with different cultural background, with different expectations and different biases into this space and to manage the conversation very well. If you don't do that very well, then there's a chance that this whole thing will be drifted and then you start pursuing somebody's agenda without knowing it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adaibo. I'm going to, before I call on Dr. Dara, I'm going to ask our participants again to respond to two other, which will be my last questions for this session before I take other questions from participants. I would like participants to share their thoughts on how we can, as a nation, as individuals, as institutions, how we can build forward better using the participatory stakeholder method. How do you think we can build forward better using the participatory stakeholder evaluation method? We all know that globally, we're all passing through the COVID-19 pandemic. And after the pandemic, we're hoping that the pandemic fizzles out soon enough, or at least we're hoping that it gets to a stage where we can manage it better. Many countries will be going into the recovery phase. So going forward and building better, how do we think participatory stakeholder evaluation method can be used to help achieve that process of the recovery phase? And then we all know about the new normal. So is it possible, or are there likely to be changes in the way participatory stakeholder method is being done going forward? You know, we've talked about bringing a lot of stakeholders together and all of that. So I would like the participants to share their thoughts. You can raise your hand if you want to respond to that. But before then, let's take on Dr. Dara. Let him share at least one challenge that PIN Foundation experienced while they were using the participatory stakeholder evaluation method.
Thank you. I think Prof, during the course of his presentation, made the point quite succinctly about the skill and the experience of the facilitator. That is a very critical input into the process, because the quality of the outcome from participatory stakeholder evaluation method would depend on the quality of the facilitation of the entire process, especially given some of the scenarios that Sam just described, where we have different bunches of stakeholders from different places, different backgrounds, with different expectations and different biases. How do we manage all of this? And we do know also, even from Prof's presentation also, that the skilled facilitators are not easily available. Skilled facilitators in terms of multi-stakeholder processes, skilled facilitators in terms of conflict management, in terms of capacity building, they are not easy to come by, because this is not a very, very familiar approach to evaluation, and it's not one that has been applied, readily. And how do we improve our skills and competencies is through ongoing application and regular application. You continue to build on existing knowledge and skills and proficiencies as we do it several times. So it was a major challenge. When we did our first review in 2014, we had to bring in an international consultant, to lead the facilitator, to lead that process, working with a national facilitator. But when we did it in 2019, we already had, skills available. So the facilitator that was selected was a national, who led the entire process. Facilitation is very important from the standpoint of, of looking at the volume and the magnitude of data that is generated from the various interviews. It's a qualitative process to a large extent. And how do we reduce the stakeholder viewpoints to key ideas without really losing the essence of what they are saying. I mean, you want to reduce about 700 pages of a report to something that is less than 100 or maybe 150 at most. That is a lot of, it takes a lot of skills and experience to manage that process, to be able to cut out the fat and focus on key ideas and what is important that the stakeholders are saying. I think I'll leave it there. And back to you, Bumi. Selecting the stakeholders, experienced facilitators is always a challenge. And I think we'll still continue to face this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Akala. I have two people who have responded or who have indicated interest in responding to the questions I just asked about building forward better. I'm delighted to have Ms. Yamisi Razomkuti on board. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us. Please unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Good afternoon, ma. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Anything Prof. Ajibola is involved in, it would be very, very interesting. So I try not to miss it. And I have not been let down. And the various presentations we've had. I mean, I cannot say how important, there's no way I can express how important stakeholder engagement is and participatory monitoring for development. Because unless there is a process where everybody has their eye on the ball and everybody is included and everybody has an opportunity to be part of the process, you are never likely to get successful outcomes. There were two key important exercises I was actually part of. One was when Governor Fashola was in charge of Lagos State, and he organized monitoring, evaluation, physical monitoring of projects around Lagos State. And it engendered a lot of, not just inclusion and stakeholder understanding of the project, but it created ownership, as many of you have said. And even when things are not quite right, when people own the process, they are more likely to want to be part of the solution and see it as their asset, which needs to be protected, and where they can also engage in improvement. And the other thing was I was the World Bank consultant on stakeholder engagement for Lagos Water Corporation. And well, the challenge of government, I think, is also lack of cohesion, because there are many platforms for monitoring, but there isn't a central thing. If you go to the Lagos State website or other government websites in Nigeria, you are not going to find a cohesive platform where you can tailor and submit your challenges and have positive responses, speedy responses. And it's the same thing when I was working on this project with Lagos State. And if you go to the website, it's all rather confusing. And part of the project is also to develop tools for citizens to engage, where they can go online, where they can go use their phones. Various tools were made available, but the challenge is that the people themselves were not responding as well as they could. And my people don't seem to have the tenacity and the patience to follow through on their complaints until there's some resolution. So I think we all need to work both on the demand and the supply side, work with government assist them to develop a more coherent, a more cohesive platform for engagement and stakeholder and open government, those kinds of tools and instruments, and also work with citizens to help them to understand the importance of engagement. That the fact that sounding off on social media may relieve some tension, but it actually doesn't solve the problem. And the insecurity and other dangers that we see around us now is a direct result of Nigerians not having been included in the process of governing their nation. So like I said, both sides need to do something. Government needs to do more. Citizens also need to know that they have the power, they have the tools, they have the opportunity, and it's up to them to engage more effectively. It's a two-way street, and we can't leave it one side to the other. So these are just my brief comments. Thank you so much, Professor Jibola, for this opportunity once again to ginger us to the importance of participatory monitoring and engagement. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Yemisi Ransom-Kuti. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. COEG, are you on? Please unmute yourself. I recognize your hand, Chikeze Okpara. I'll call you shortly. COEG, kindly unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Prof, for this session. It's been very helpful and educating. One of the questions you asked, what's going on in my mind is, one of the questions you asked is, how can government benefit from PSEs? And one of the things I've observed is that because of the structure of our polity, it tends to have a situation where the winner takes it all. And therefore, once you have a party in government, the governor or the president decides what happens. And therefore, even if you do PSC and do town halls, because it is a structure that is designed to support partisanship, they often tend not to carry other non-party stakeholders in the outcome and in the implementation of the programs. And so you find that those who get contracts, who get to get involved in government implementations are partisan members and loyal partisan members. And amongst that, you find dissensions. You find people who are not happy with government programs. And then, unfortunately, if you have a situation like what we have, you have a worse situation to go for it. So that's one area the implementers of PSC can look at how that can happen. But again, this probably is a structural thing with our constitution, and that needs to be looked into. Thank you.
Thank you very much, COEG, for your comments. I'm going to call Fisayo and Chikeze shortly, and I'm also going to be calling our panelists for their final thoughts in a short while. But before then, I'd like us to take the third poll. The third poll, and the question is, do you think you have gained more knowledge about participatory stakeholder evaluation method? Do you think you have gained more knowledge about participatory stakeholder evaluation? Please respond to the chat and give us a few seconds to do that. Okay, so let's see the results. Oh, great. This is so good to know. It's good to know that everyone, including myself, learned a lot more about participatory stakeholder evaluation. Okay, thank you everyone for responding to the poll. I'm now going to go to Fisayo and then I'll call Chikeze before I take the final thoughts from our panelists. have about 2 or 3 more questions. We'll see if we can take those questions. We'll try to, give some time for that to happen. Fisaya, please unmute yourself. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. My regards to everyone and to all the panelists. It's been a good session. Well, I've made my comment, and which is to say that it's an understatement, and Nigeria actually needs a PSC urgently, going by the challenges we have in the country at this moment. It's a process I never thought could actually be applied to our situation, but listening into all the presentations and thinking about that process, I think it's indeed what we need at this moment. Case in point is the Senate's ongoing review. A lot of people who have commented have mentioned it, and we can always see that it's just a partisan kind of review. I doubt if things are going to move beyond the talk show, as we normally have. Some of the challenges that we've highlighted, I think, is contextual. For example, for like a CSO, like Mrs. Adesoya mentioned, it could be financial. For an organization, like Chevron, it could be actually selecting the participants. So these challenges could be contextual when it comes to, starting off the process. I would like to make a suggestion to NNF and to, the partners. Maybe it's high time to build a curriculum on PSC to be introduced for students of social work, sociology, and students who are into public policy. I think it's a very vital tool that we need at this point in time in our nation. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Fisayo. It's so good to hear from you again. Thank you for joining us today. And yes, I do agree with you. I know that we have academic institutions and research institutions joining in as well. So I'm sure that might also be something they might be interested in. Thank you, Chikeze Okpara, for your patience. Please unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, thank you, Bumi. Thank you so much. My thoughts on this is, yes, we are talking about participatory evaluation, but I want to take it from a very different angle. Even before we get to evaluation, for government, there is something I feel that is always missing, and that is why it seems government interventions at the end has little or no effect when it comes to people feeling that presence, and that is more of the government. I mean, this is my recommendation. It's more of the government understanding the need for problem analysis, which will include the people. In fact, it's not waiting till evaluation to start, involving the people. I mean, it starts from the intervention design, where the people has to also be, brought into the whole situation to understand the core problem that would perhaps have a sprinkle effect that addresses other issues that can contribute to change in the society. And understanding the people also in mapping stakeholder, identifying the actual stakeholders in participatory evaluation. And that will also solve a lot of issues. I have concern with that in terms of government, even, engaging the people. And you see, a lot of times what we see is that even when you do these things, you see that the effects of that evaluation, the effects of that intervention, even when you carry out participatory evaluation, will not be felt. I feel we should encourage the government or have a design for the government to start looking at involving the people from even the project design, even before getting to evaluation itself. So that is just my thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ikeze Okpara. Thank you very much. Very useful thoughts there. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I'm going to be taking the last 3 questions, and then we'll ask the panelists to share their final thoughts with us. I'm going to be starting with Laide. One of the questions we got in the chat box is, what is your recommendation as regards time interval between the PSC report, when the PSC report is released and shared with the relevant stakeholders? Also, is it mandatory to share PSC report to all interviewers in the course of data collection? So, Mrs. Adesoya, can you respond to that question? I have 2 other questions that I'm going to be asking Dr. Akala and Mr. Sam Daibu.
Okay, thank you, Bumi. Is it compulsory to share the reports of your PSC with stakeholders? I think it is important that you share the outcome of your evaluation. Many of those that you will get to speak with on the field would have their inputs, they would raise issues, they will ask questions. The expectation is that, and these are issues that affect them directly as individuals. So the expectation is at the end of the evaluation, when you're done, they should get a feedback in terms of what are the next steps. Though it's a participatory stakeholder evaluation, it's not all stakeholders are involved in that process. So for those other stakeholders that are not involved in the evaluation process, I believe that it is important that they get to know what the outcome of the evaluation is and what are the next steps, so that by the time they get to hear information about this is what we're going to do next, it will not be strange to them. And then it's a question of what have you promised in the process of your interaction during the evaluation. If for any reason they have asked you or they have complained that maybe in the past they did not get information in terms of next steps or what came out of the evaluation, and you have gone ahead to make a commitment that you're going to share the results of evaluation with them, I think you should keep that word, you should keep that promise. So for whatever it is worth, once you have made a commitment that you're going to share the outcome of evaluation with your stakeholders, it is important that as soon as the report is complete, you have taken decision in terms of next steps, the recommendations have been agreed, you should go back and let them know the outcome. 2 reasons. 1, you are keeping your credibility intact, and then you are building bridges for next time you need to interact with those people. They are likely to be welcoming because you have worked with them in the past and you fulfilled your promises. So I think it is important that we keep our promises, and it is important for them to know the outcome of the evaluation process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laide. I have 2 more questions. I'm going to throw it open to Dr. Dara and Mr. Sam Daibu. So please feel free to respond to any of the questions you would like. I have a question from Omori John. He says, in promoting rural economy via agribusiness, how does PSC apply? In promoting rural economy via agribusiness, how does PSC apply? Dr. Dara, Mr. Sam Daibu, anyone can respond to that question. The second question is, what are the most critical factors of the planning workshop? As I understand it, it's very important to get this right if we must have a successful fieldwork and eventual reporting. And that question is from Lydia Ndieze.
So this is Sam. So let me attempt to answer the question on the value or the process for the planning workshop. I mean, from our own experience, the planning workshop actually sets the tone. And because that's when you, I mean, as stakeholders or all those who are participating in that process, that's where you want to define the objectives of the evaluation. What are the expectations? What do you hope to achieve with this evaluation? And then when you do that, then what do you expect? What do you want to do with the outcome of the evaluation? Is it for the purpose of process improvement? Is it for purposes of identifying what opportunities are in terms of the project or program that you're running? Or is it for the purpose of just for advocacy? Whatever, you define all of that. And it's very important that all stakeholders have alignment in that space. So once that also helps you to define, okay, if I'm going to do that, then also there's a planning workshop. You also plan about, okay, what kind of questions do you want to ask? What do you want to focus on? And then using the appreciative inquiry, which Lydia spoke to earlier on, is also a fundamental approach in using this model. Basically looking at what are the things that are working and build from there. Because the human tendency is that you ask people questions, the problem will tell you the problem first. But if you ask from the perspective of what is working, because no matter how terrible the system is, certain things are working. And so you want to find out what are those things that are working, what are those systems that are working within the broader perspective. And then you start up from that place and you get told into what the other things that may be opportunities for you to improve. And so again, that planning workshop also provides the opportunity for you to start, okay, let's work in logistics of it. How are we going to make this happen? How are we going to make this happen? What are the themes of this whole planning workshop? So for me, the summary of it all is, it is key and very paramount that we get that planning workshop right, because that's where you get everybody on board. Everybody who is involved in that process, usually in the PSE, usually is presented at the planning workshop. So like I say, it's a very first key step, and that's where most times all the stakeholders are meeting for the very first time. So because you notice at the beginning when you're framing, mainly the donor or whoever is wanting the evaluation done and the facilitators who meet, and thereafter. So the planning workshop is where all the stakeholders meet for the very first time. So those are my thoughts at this point with regards to the question. On the one of agriculture, Dr. Dara does the team does a lot of agricultural stuff, so I'll defer that for him to answer. Thanks.
Very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Sam Daibo. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Dara.
All right, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Bumi. I guess the person who asked that question is either an agriculturist or somebody that is working on an agricultural development program. So let me start by saying that one of the speakers earlier on, Chikeze Okwara, actually spoke a lot to this question. The thing is, the PSC method has a basket of tools and approaches that are applicable to any development program, whether it's agro enterprises or pure agricultural development or any kind of social development program. It's applicable. So what is the starting point of our analysis? As he rightly pointed out, Chikeze earlier on, that we don't need to wait till evaluation stage before we start applying these tools and techniques. We want to carry out a situation analysis. What is it that we are thinking about in terms of agricultural development promotion? What is the current situation? The point of emphasis is before you are, or in an attempt to answer that question, you want to consult with a broad range of stakeholders, either government or policy makers, service providers, donor agencies, real people that are involved, farmers and processors, and small business operators in that space. What are the issues? What are their priorities? That will help in the design of any program, right? And once we're implementing the program, another way to apply these tools is in monitoring. You don't just send your M&E officers, out there alone, but you want to involve the stakeholders in the monitoring process, which is often referred to as participatory monitoring. And periodically also, you want to carry out evaluation. So again, using these tools and approaches. So in essence, what we are saying is right from the planning stage through to implementation and to the end, when you are evaluating, or maybe the end of a phase, PSC tools and approaches and methods becomes applicable. The key thing is you want to involve stakeholders, as many of them as possible, and you make your decisions about the programs as broad-based as possible using stakeholder input. So I think that's essentially how we can use some of this PSC, or how we can apply the PSC method in designing agro-development programs. And of course, Sam adequately covered the one on the planning workshop, so no need to talk about that again. Over to you, Bumi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dara.
Bumi, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. I'm going to be asking the panelists to share with us their parting shots or their final thoughts. But before then, I'm going to ask participants who have not shared their contact details with us to please do so. We'll be sharing the presentation as well as the video recording as requested by participants to us. So please share your contact details with us. For those who are joining us on our YouTube channel, please remember to drop your contact details with us as well. So parting shots from our panelists, I'll start with Mr. Sam Daibo.
Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to share our own experience with regards to this participatory stakeholder evaluation. It's been an interesting journey for us. It's been a good learning for us, and for us as a company, I find it to be extremely useful in managing our engagement, our relationship with our stakeholders, and also in managing our social investments. And it's something we'd like to encourage for others to continue to utilize. And I believe that for those of us who have participated in this session today, you found it useful. What we've tried to cover in the last 1.5 hours, that there's a whole body of knowledge, information around this that I would like to encourage that take time out to understand and use and get familiar with the process. Thank you very much, NNF, for putting us, for having this and then having us on the panel. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Sam Daibo. Mr. Sam Daibo is the area manager, policy, government, and public affairs field operations of Chevron Nigeria Limited. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Dr. Dara, kindly share your parting thoughts with us.
Okay, thanks again, Bumi. And again, as I said at the beginning, we think it's a privilege to be able to share this platform today, to share our own experiences in the use of participatory stakeholder evaluation methods. In conclusion, I think for us as development practitioners, the importance of PSC cannot be overemphasized. One of the challenges that we mentioned here today is the cost. That could be relatively more costly than the other approaches. But we should not be deterred. If we are genuinely interested in the impact of our programs or in the sustainability of these programs, then PSC is the way to go. And I'd like to respond to the one comment about availability of skills and pool of facilitators. Payne Foundation has a program that we call Capable under our capacity building program. Capable is capacity building for local empowerment, and we've been running some programs on M&A in the past. I think we could consider running a program under that, a program on PSC under that capable program in future, because I believe we need to build a pool of expertise in the application of PSA methods in Nigeria. Thank you so very much, and I wish everyone a resounding success in the use of PSA methods in our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dara Akala, Executive Director of Foundation for Partnership Initiatives in the Niger Delta. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And we look forward to PIN's integration of training on PSC as part of the Capable program. Thank you, sir. I would also like to say a very big thank you to Professor Obafemi Ajibola, Managing Director of New Nigeria Foundation. He was the one that took us through the training session in the morning. It was very robust. All 100% of the participants have confirmed that they have increased knowledge about participatory stakeholder evaluation. So it's been worth the while, I believe. Thank you very much, sir. We're grateful, sir. Then I would like to also say a very big thank you to Mrs. Laide Adesoya, Deputy Director and Head of Programs Department of New Nigeria Foundation. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for sharing experiences about, sharing NNF's experiences on PSC. We've all learned a lot. Thank you very much. We're grateful. Thank you for your time. And to everyone on this platform, would like to say a very, very big thank you. You've been a great, great participant. I don't know how to say that. It's been a very participatory session. You've shared your thoughts, you've asked questions, we've all responded to the questions. And I think it's been very exciting for me. We're very grateful. New Nigeria Foundation is happy that all of us could participate in this. And we look forward to your participation in our future webinars. We are happy that the G-Local Evaluation Week this year has been a success, and we look forward to next year's G-Local Evaluation. We also look forward to sharing information about other webinars organized by New Nigeria Foundation with everyone. If you would like to contact New Nigeria Foundation, we have put our information out there for us to see. So please feel free to reach out to us if you need to contact us. We would also be very happy to share more information about how we can help you if you are implementing your participatory stakeholder evaluation program, or if you are utilizing the method. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Bumi. Well done.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye, everybody. Friday and cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been very good. Thank you and well done. Thank you, Bumi. Wonderful facilitation. You'll be the next big facilitator in PSC now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Well done, everyone. Great job.
Yeah, well done indeed. Great job.
Well done. That was very interesting and engaging.
Thank you, everyone, members of the team who are working behind that, that doing the hard work, and people cannot see you, but we're grateful. Thank you, Emanuela. Thank you, Akin. Thank you, Wemimo. Thank you very much. Well done, everyone.